This is Joel Webbon. He's a Christian nationalist and extremist. I've talked about him before a few times, but I want to talk about him again because he decided to be the interpreter of Jewish law. Seriously, he seems to think that he knows Jewish law better than Jews do. So let's talk about it. Let's talk about whether this Christian nationalist who wants to execute gay people, who wants to institute a Christian government, fully Christian government, the whole 9 yards. Talk about this guy who wants to do that and his complete lack of knowledge on the subject. Check this out. This is like a new video from him, and then we're going to like talk about who he is in more depth.
The last thing I was going to say is with the civil law, as it comes to penalty, this is a maximum penalty. This is a case law system.
Talking about gay people being executed. You know, Leviticus 18 and 20 says that it's the death penalty for men who lie with men, basically. And we're going to talk about it in more depth in a minute, but just understand that this guy is justifying the death penalty right now.
Law system. Mm-hmm. And what's being listed in the Old Testament is a maximum penalty. So think of like in the state of Texas, I'm going to get this wrong, but you'll get the point.
Yeah, I made a lot of cuts because he just goes off in pointless directions.
Littering, just throwing a piece of trash out your car window as you're driving down the interstate was punishable, and it would give a maximum penalty. It would be like up to 2 years in jail and a $5,000 fine. And I use that as a humorous example, but that makes the point.
So he's saying that the legal structure in ancient Israel, we're talking like 5,000 years ago or something, the ancient structure had judges and legislature, and they passed these laws and they adjudicate whether you did this, and they had different levels of punishment and everything, like America runs, kind of like that. Is that what you're saying? I did a lot of research on this to find out if there's like any basis to this at all, and the answer is no. It's completely made up. I pulled up some Jewish resources to read about it. So we'll get to that in a second. Just keep listening here.
Thing is, Joel, if there was someone who was dumping truckloads of trash on the side of the highway, then the law has teeth.
Exactly. So it's like, why does it even have? Yep. So then why even have a maximum penalty if we're talking about something that doesn't necessitate that degree of a penalty as a first offense? Well, because people might be repeat offenders. That's why. And so, if you've got a serious...
Okay, so when Leviticus says that it's the death penalty for men who lie with men, that's only for repeat offenses? What's the punishment for men who lie with men once? What's the punishment for people who are just a little effeminate but aren't gay? Is there a punishment for them? I mean, this is like brain rot territory. Like, this guy has no idea what he's talking about, and he's going off in this bizarre direction based on faulty assumption after faulty assumption, and just keeps building this gigantic tower in completely the wrong place. Just to add a little bit of context to this, I'm sure that there are nuances to Jewish law that we don't understand today. We'd have to talk to an Old Testament historian, an expert on this to understand this fully. And honestly, maybe somebody who is Jewish too, because that person likely understands how Jewish law works better than anybody could possibly understand on the outside. But it's such a niche issue that you couldn't even go to somebody who knows the New Testament like the back of their hand, like an expert in the New Testament. You have to go to somebody who not only understands the language so they can read the original words off the page, but is also like a legal scholar, because this is like complex stuff. Now, the Old Testament mentions being gay to any degree in 3 different places. First one is Genesis 1:19, I think, or maybe it's 19:1. Yeah, 19:1 is where Sodom and Gomorrah is mentioned. Now, Sodom and Gomorrah were not destroyed because of their gay people or whatever. They were destroyed because of their ill treatment of the poor, according to the book of Ezekiel. Like, why did they even go there in the first place? Their ill treatment of the poor. The next two, Leviticus 18 and Leviticus 20, a little bit more complex than that. So let's just read this source from a Jewish website, jewishvirtuallibrary.org. Among the sexual perversions prescribed as criminal offenses in the moral code of the Torah, which is like part of the Bible, it's the Jewish section of the Bible, are homosexual relations between males, Leviticus 18:22. Both offending parties are threatened with capital punishment, Leviticus 20:13, though minors under 13 years of age are exempt from this, as from any other penalty. Talmudic law extends the prohibition, but not the penalty, which is limited to flagellation, also to lesbianism, i.e., homosexual intimacies between women, based on the general warning not to indulge in the abhorrent practices of the Egyptians and the Canaanites. Right, so the Canaanites lived in the area, and Jews and Canaanites did not get along at all. But they were, there was some cross-pollination with their culture. You know, they shared cultural values and stuff. Yahweh is originally a Canaanite god. While the laws on both offenses are codified by Maimonides, which is a Jewish scholar from, thousands of years ago, the prohibition of homosexuality proper is omitted from R. Joseph Caro's Sulhan Aruch. This omission reflects the perceived absence of homosexuality among Jews rather than any difference of views on the criminality of these acts. Quick interjection, this won't take long, I promise. I'd appreciate it if you watched to the end of the video, or at least a couple extra seconds, because YouTube bases its algorithm off of watch time. The more watch time a video has, the further the video will go. Also, take a look at my website, owenmorgan.com. I'm selling my book, Understanding Jehovah's Witnesses, 400 pages, and my second book, 100 Questions for Jehovah's Witnesses, which is about 80 pages. And you can find them both there on the website. Audio form, ebook form, whatever. It's about my experiences within the religion and the history of the religion generally. The 100 questions are intended to challenge a religious leader, so I'd appreciate it if you give it a read. Okay, back to the video. A lot of this comes from the Bible and its biblical narrative, and it's believed by Jews and Christians alike. Whether it's actual, factual history is irrelevant. A lot of it probably isn't. Moses is not a real person, but in the story of Moses, he goes up to the mountain, if you remember, he gets the 10 commandments, and he comes back down and he gives them to people, right? I mean, golden calf and all that other junk, but that's the important part. Moses didn't just bring the 10 commandments, though. Moses brought 613 commandments, I believe. Or 603. Anyway, I don't remember exactly. Over 600 commandments. And it was all kinds of different stuff. And you can read those other commandments after the first 10. Like, don't put 2 seeds in the same hole. Don't wear cotton and linen blends. Don't eat shellfish. Don't eat pork. The men lying with men thing, and all of the other stuff. Why did evangelical Christians pick the first 10 to trot around like they're some kind of idol or something? You got me. Anyway, skip forward a couple thousand years. Jesus is on earth. And if you remember in the New Testament, the gospel accounts, it talks about the scribes and the Pharisees. And they're referred to very negatively, right? Scribes are just people who interpreted the law. They were people who were usually capable of reading, not really necessarily priests. They weren't really priests. They could sign marriage certificates and things. They're just like officials. And they were framed as enemies of Jesus because they're probably some of the only people that were capable of challenging Jesus adequately. Because Jesus also seemed to know the old law really, really well. He was an apocalyptic rabbi preacher. Well, he wasn't a rabbi, actually. He was just like an apocalyptic religious leader. Anyway, the Pharisees, the other group, was part of a movement that is now called Rabbinic Judaism. It's modern-day Jews. The Pharisees turned into modern-day Jews, what we know now. And the key difference between Pharisees and other Jews of the era was they believed that when Moses came down from the mountain, he didn't just bring the written commandments, he also brought oral commandments that they passed down, cultural commandments that nobody wrote down and you wouldn't know unless you're part of the culture. So the Pharisees had this whole big set of cultural things that they were supposed to do all the time. And they felt like it was like an obligation to not write any of that stuff down. But then the temple got destroyed in 70 CE, 30 years after Jesus died. And they said, all right, we're going to have to write these oral commandments down just to preserve them in case we die out or something. So they wrote all of those down, and that is what is now known as the Talmud, I believe. That's Talmudic law right here. That is the oral commands that the Pharisees wrote down. It's been interpreted 2 different times and like written down and fixed or whatever 2 different times in history primarily. And one of them, the newer one, I think it's like from the 500s. It's been a while since I read about this. I'm sorry. But the newer one from the 500s, I think, CE, is the more accurate translated version and the more accurate interpretation of the law based on the cultural values at the time that these laws were like penned, basically. So if we want to understand how gay people were treated in the old days, then we should look to Jews for the answer, it seems to me. We should look to Talmudic law and the commandments and how those things were implemented specifically. Now, this article that I read here on Jewish Virtual Library, if you notice, it said, Talmudic law extends the prohibition, but not the penalty, which is limited to flagellation, also to lesbianism. So in Talmudic law, in Jewish culture, people were not killed for being gay. They did not have the death penalty. And also, what does being gay mean exactly? Not what we think it means today. Long-term gay marriage was not addressed in the old law at all. And only 2 things were banned to any degree, flagellation and lesbianism. And even when you do those things, you're not killed for it. Quick interjection. This won't take long, I promise. I just want to say I'd appreciate it if you check my Patreon. OwenMorgan.com/Patreon to find it. YouTube's algorithm goes up and down, so I can never predict where it's going to be. Having patrons gives me some level of stability. Okay, back to the video. Maimonides, very well-known Jewish scholar from thousands of years ago, didn't include it. So it says here, while the laws on both offenses are codified by Maimonides, the prohibition of homosexuality proper is omitted from R. Joseph Caro's Shulchan Aruch. And the Shulchan Aruch is a legal code compiled by the great Sephardic rabbi Joseph Caro in the mid-1500s. It's still the standard legal code of Judaism when rabbis, particularly if they are Orthodox, are asked to rule on a question of Jewish law. The first volume they consult is the Shulchan Aruch. I'm probably butchering that. I apologize. A major reason for the universal acceptance is that it was the first code to list differing customs and laws of both Sephardic, oh my God, I don't want ads, both Sephardic and Ashkenazic Jewry. So Sephardic Jews were primarily from Spain and the USSR and other areas like that. Ashkenazi are from Europe and Mizrahi are from the Middle East. So anyway, this scholar from the 1500s compiled Jewish law into a brand new, clear thing that reflected the cultural values and expectations and everything of the Jewish people in the 1500s, and he omitted anything about being gay entirely because it wasn't enforced. It wasn't even discussed, really, in ancient Jewish law or in ancient Jewish culture, is my point here. So everything that Joel Webbin is saying here is fabricated off the top of his head, and he's looking at it through the lens of like a modern day person, how somebody in the modern era would view a legal system that's thousands of years old. It is insane. All right, so listen just a little bit more here.
And so, yeah, if you've got a serial litterer who is just with complete reckless abandon, just throwing Coke bottles out, and he's doing it every single day and trashing up all this stuff, and he's received citation.
He's remodeling his house, and he's just dumping it all on public land.
And some of it is even like,
See, this is them building gigantic assumptions off of nothing because they're wrong. This is not how the Jewish law worked at all.
Like, certain it's chemicals and things that are harmful.
Yep.
And and there's been warnings, and then there's been even citations, and he won't stop. And it's like, at a certain point, that guy needs to be put away. He's a threat to society. That guy needs to go to jail.
Sure. So somebody is serial littering, I suppose they should get time for it if they're dumping chemicals and stuff into the ground and into like water supply and stuff like that, yeah, they should face jail time for that kind of thing. That's how we view it with our modern perception. That is not how it worked before. I don't understand how these people are so ignorant about this is a perfect example of the Dunning-Kruger effect, isn't it? There's a level of knowledge about a subject that people reach that isn't enough to realize that you know nothing about it, practically. There are so many more experts on the subject, but you know just enough to kind of formulate completely backward conspiracy theories. Like if somebody says, you know what, the planets go around the sun and electrons go around a nucleus. So do you think that we're just a really big atom on something else, some other gigantic whatever? That's not how any of that works. To even propose something like that makes it clear you don't understand the first thing about quantum mechanics or even like planetary movement, which is okay. It's okay to say you don't know. That's fine. In fact, that's good. Say, I don't know, and find out. You know, if this guy was correct about all of this, I want to know. I want to be correct too. That's why I went in search of an answer. Whatever the answer happens to be, I'm not emotionally invested in this. If the Old Testament or if the old Jewish law said gay people should be executed and genuinely there was no gay marriage no matter what, I would say, wow, that's really messed up. Jewish culture from ancient times is like really, really bad, and I don't support that at all. I wouldn't like justify it and try to twist it around or whatever. This is just what it is. This guy here knows just enough about the Bible to build this gigantic, ridiculous assumption off of it, but he doesn't know enough to realize that he knows practically nothing else about it. That's it. What an absurd human being.
That guy needs to go to jail, and even for littering. But we're talking about reaching a certain degree. And so all that back to the civil codes given to Israel, the only crime that mandated capital punishment, the death penalty, and we see this from not just the civil law with Israel, but the Noahic covenant in Genesis chapter 9, that if someone takes another man's life, then he forfeits his own. And what is that?
Right. So now he's talking about murder, right? An eye for an eye or whatever. Now, today, we know that that's terrible, actually. It's not even just a matter of, like, we don't want to take human life. It's a matter of this doesn't do anything for anybody. It doesn't actually correct any problems. Eye for an eye leaves the whole world blind, as they say. But it's in the Bible, so he's going to try to find some way to justify it. And he's going to work it into his moral system or whatever. Here's something I've noticed. You can go through the Bible and find a justification for basically any moral position you have. Because moral positions and ideals espoused by the Bible are more often than not reversed a chapter later. Because it's not one book, it's 66 different books. But by dozens of authors spanning thousands of years, you can't possibly build a moral system off of this because it's contradictory. So what we have here is three guys sitting around a table formulating some justification for killing people. That's what's happening. They're finding verses in the Bible that justify murder in their eyes. And they're using, any means necessary.
And what does that actually do? We can map it out so easily statistically from state to state where capital punishment is on the books for murder. Guess what? There's less murder.
Yep.
False. My God, dude. Like, this guy says things so confidently. Just one quick Google search away, and we can find information on this. It isn't even that hard. It took me literally 15 seconds to find information on this. This is from the Cato Institute. One overall assessment concludes, in the 32 states in the Union where the death penalty is legal, as well as the federal government, the death penalty has grown to be much more expansive than life imprisonment, whether with or without parole. This greater cost comes from the more expensive living conditions, a much more extensive legal process, and increasing resistance to the death penalty from chemical manufacturers overseas. So you cannot possibly use it's cheaper as a justification to kill people. That's the point. Because it's not. These costs could even become higher pending the outcome of various lawsuits against various states for their botched executions. Each death penalty inmate is approximately $1.12 million more than a general population inmate. $1.12 million more. That is insane. When a local government bears the expense of trial, it must raise funds or reallocate them from other sources. In Texas, among other states, the cost of trial is borne primarily at the county level. A panel of Texas county spending over the last decade, constructed from audited financial statements, shows counties meet the expense of trial by raising property tax rates and by reducing public safety expenditure. Property crime rises as a consequence of the latter. The death penalty may therefore impede criminal deterrence if its finance is left to local rather than centralized government. All that is to say, the death penalty is leading to more crime, not less. Also, hold on. There's something else that I wanted to find here. Own admission, death penalty. Oh, here. Opposition to the death penalty is growing among the American public, and the Biden administration must follow through on its promise to end this horror. The Department of Justice must heed its own admission that the death penalty doesn't stop crime, and our legislators must continue to take up the issue on the congressional floor. There's a Department of Justice document released here that talks about the deterrence of crime, and whether this actually deters crime or not. Deter would-be criminals by using scientific evidence about human behavior and perceptions about the costs, risks, and rewards of crime. There is no proof the death penalty deters criminals. Department of Justice, okay? This is the department of the U.S. government that wants people to go to jail and wants to punish them. That's their job. According to the National Academy of Sciences, quote, research on the deterrent effect of capital punishment is uninformative about whether capital punishment increases, decreases, or has no effect on homicide rates. In his 2013 essay, Deterrence in the 21st Century, Daniel S. Nagin succinctly summarized the current state of theory and empirical knowledge about deterrence. The information in this publication is drawn from Nagin's essay, with additional context provided by NIJ, and is presented here to help those who make policies and laws that are based on science. This is, once again, Department of Justice document that we're reading here. Prison is an important option for incapacitating and punishing those who commit crimes, but the data show long prison sentences do little to deter people from committing future crimes. Viewing the findings of research on severity effects in their totality, there is evidence suggesting that short sentences may be a deterrent. However, a consistent finding is that increases in already lengthy sentences produce, at best, a very modest deterrent effect. You can measure this, too, in other ways. Okay, if you offer somebody $10 now or $100 a year from now, they will always pick the $10 now, just about. Again, I'm pulling this from studies that have been done by scientists. Okay? Just read about it. I forget what this study is called now, but it's easily looked up. If you offer them $10 6 months from now or $100 a year from now, they will always pick the $100, just about. That says something about the way that humans view the future, view their future selves or whatever. The data from the scientific community, from the Department of Justice, not to use weasel words here, from Daniel S. Nagin's essay, Deterrence in the 21st Century. In all of these sources, the death penalty or longer prison sentences do not deter crime. That's the point here. So once again, Joel Webbin he knows just enough to know that the subject exists and then confidently asserts factual claims that are wrong and then builds his entire worldview off of that.
We can map it out so easily statistically from state to state where capital punishment is on the books for murder. Guess what? There's less murder.
Yep.
Where did he even get that? That's not true. He's just making it up, right?
Yep.
So it actually is pro-life. Like Leviticus goes hard. Yes, it does. But it is important in understanding the case law system and general equity theonomy and a maximum.
theonomy is kind of like Christian nationalism, except theonomists have existed for a very long time in the United States. And it's basically the idea that you want to, it's a new government structure that's not one that Christian nationalists necessarily want to set up. It's one where the lawmakers get their laws from pastors. Like the pastors are writing them and giving them to the lawmakers, and then they're whatever. And we're just about there with some lawmakers. Some lawmakers do get their stuff from pastors. Anyway, that's what he means when he says theonomist.
Important in understanding the case law system and general equity theonomy and a maximum penalty for repeat offenders, right? If you got somebody who sleeps with another man and there's witnesses, that's the other thing. There would have to be 2 or 3 witnesses.
2 or 3 witnesses? I love it, dude. This is also from the Bible. This is Jehovah's Witnesses' justification for doing things the way that they do. And you know what we found? We found a gigantic loophole in that system. There was a Jehovah's Witness who was taking advantage of kids in the congregation, but there have to be 2 witnesses to the crime. So somebody has to like walk in and visually see this happening. And not just one, has to be 2 people. I guess the victim could count. Jehovah's Witnesses broke that rule by saying, okay, it doesn't have to be 2 witnesses to the same event. It can be 2 witnesses in different events. Like if one victim says this happened and another victim says this happened, then I guess we can do something about it. But unless there are 2, we don't do anything. That's how Jehovah's Witnesses have it set up. Basically, today, pretty much. I mean, with some exceptions and nuances in it now. But having that policy instituted led to people who take advantage of kids doing that to one kid in one congregation and then moving on to the next. Since there's no second witness, the elders can't say a thing about it. They keep their mouths shut and pretend it didn't even happen. That's how the religion wants it to go. And also, in the 60s, they started this whole, I mean, I'm going down a Jehovah's Witness rabbit hole right now, but in the 60s, they instituted a no police policy, that where you're not supposed to call police if you find out of a crime being committed like that. You're supposed to deal with it internally. And again, they're kind of at least pretending to move away from that, even though I don't really think that they actually are in practice. But that left gigantic loopholes. They don't want to rely on secular authorities because in a perfect world, as Joel Webbin is laying out here, the secular authorities would use this method. There would be no secular authorities. He wants to talk about being pro-life. He wants to talk about changing laws in such a way that it reflects biblical values and makes it more fair and saves more lives and all that stuff. That's just false. All of it is false. We've seen all of these systems instituted, and it does not work that way. I can't even believe, like, how does he come out here and say this so confidently? He did not even research it. He didn't. If he did, then he's a lying scumbag. If he really did research this, then he knows that he's not telling the truth right now. So either he's dumb as dog or a liar. Intentional, knowing liar. Well, let me rephrase. An intentional, knowing, habitual liar. Not somebody who just says a lie one time. He does this for a living. Goes out here on this Right Response Ministries thing and talks about this constantly and quotes false facts to people. I'm sorry, alternative facts, as Trump's press secretary would say.
Who sleeps with another man. And there's witnesses. That's the other thing. There would have to be 2 or 3 witnesses, not just hearsay. They had to actually see it occur, or the person gives their own confession.
Oh, so in the case where somebody murders somebody else, and there were not any witnesses, or the guy kills all of the witnesses, he just gets out of it then, right? In this guy's world? What? I mean, that's just murder. Think about the effect on every other crime. Do you know how many people actually witness crimes? Almost 0. We use DNA evidence and fingerprints and all of this other stuff, you know, hair testing and so on and so forth, a blood spatter analysis and all that to find out how the crime was committed and who was a most likely culprit, and then work backward from there and try to figure out if that's actually what happened. And, you know, put some heat on them to get them to confess. That's how the police system or the investigation system works today. But he says throw all of that out. We don't need DNA testing, I guess. We need 2 or 3 witnesses. That's it. And he thinks this would be better? Is he saying that, like, he doesn't want, like, DNA evidence or science at all? Is he just trying to, like, kill science? I don't know. It seems like it, right? Unfortunately for him, there's actually a line in the Constitution that specifically says the government should promote science and the useful arts.
See it occur, or the person gives their own confession. And even then, it didn't necessarily mean the death penalty. It could.
Well, and to your point, shooting from memory here, but I believe in a few of the cases it was bestiality was involved, and then maybe possibly rape as well.
Right. Yep.
So I guess those are the extreme cases where you have to have 2 or 3 witnesses to the occurrence. So, if you live in the woods and you have, God, I'm trying not to get too graphic, but if you live in the woods alone with one other individual or whatever, then you'll never face accountability for this. If you kidnap somebody and bring them out to the woods, you could keep them there for 20 years, and it doesn't matter because there weren't 2 or 3 witnesses to it. Even if that person escapes, runs to the police station, says, this guy's been keeping me captive. Police go over there and see the ropes and see all the crazy stuff, the chains and locks on the doors and all of that stuff. And they see like 3 other dead bodies there. There wasn't somebody there to witness it. It feels like I'm being hyperbolic, but I'm not. I'm drawing the very basic, this is not slippery slope. This is exactly what would happen. We know because Jehovah's Witnesses tried to institute this and others. This is what happens. How could he possibly be in this mindset? This is so stupid.
Maybe possibly rape as well.
Right. Yep.
So,
or even things like that.
So keep in your mind, we're going to get into the stats.
Even taking advantage of kids, he just said. In his mind, that covers being gay, of course.
I mean, some of these are in the tens of thousands of children.
Yep. That's what I wanted to lay the groundwork for. Exactly.
That's what they're talking about right now. They're talking about gay people because in their heads, gay people are guilty of taking advantage of kids. All gay people, no matter what, that comes with being gay in their heads, even though gay people and straight people have the exact same rates of doing that kind of thing. People like that who take advantage of kids, they exist in every demographic of people, every single demographic. We, as a society, have to root that out and report it to the police and make sure that they're separated from society for the safety of society if they've taken advantage of somebody like that. But this guy is saying we want to do it to all gay people. We want to just put them in jail. And if they're repeat offenders, then we kill them. Holy dude.
Lay the groundwork for. Exactly.
I preempted you. Suicide? Thousands and thousands of people committing suicide because of the lifestyle. So you have maybe 50...
Because of the lifestyle, the gay lifestyle. They're talking about taking advantage of kids a second ago, remember? And now they're talking about the gay lifestyle choice?
To the stats. I mean, some of these are in the tens of thousands of children.
Yep. That's what I wanted to lay the groundwork for. Exactly.
I preempted you. Suicide? Thousands and thousands of people committing suicide because of the lifestyle. So you have maybe 50 people executed for this versus the damage we've had now. Which one is more merciful?
Dude, this is my favorite part of this video, okay? And here's why. I read a book called The Coming of the Third Reich by Richard J. Evans recently, and it was so fascinating, super long read. It's like 1,000 pages or something, like a 30-hour audiobook. But in the book, he describes the conditions that led up to the rise of Nazi power, right? And Hitler got people whipped into a blood frenzy by saying that Jews held all the power in society and all of the wealth and pulled all the strings and owed all the big banks and all that. And they sent you to war in World War I. In reality, Austria and Germany got a little too excited and decided to do a little bit of territorial gain, I guess you could call it. Germany took part of France in World War I. In fact, it came within 70 miles of Paris. They took a lot of France in World War I. And they took Luxembourg and Belgium, I believe, which are like 2 countries that are between France and Germany. So who sent Germans to war in World War I? This is an expansionist thing. They were doing this because they wanted more land. This was not because the Jews sent them out to blah, 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 whatever. Anyway, Hitler got people whipped into a blood frenzy over that, said the Jews control everything. In World War I, there were no Geneva Conventions. You could use chemical weapons. You could use whatever, anything. There were very few rules about like prisoners of war and things like that. And there was a lot of like gas used in World War I. You know, they would drop gas in trenches, and so they had to carry gas masks everywhere. And Hitler actually got gassed, and his mask didn't fit correctly, and he had to go to the hospital for it. It really messed him up. So he gets out there, and from his lips to you, Hitler said, if we had just gassed 6,000, high up Jews that control the world, then we wouldn't have millions of Germans gassed in the trenches. So we need to gas these people now to prevent a future war. That's what Hitler said. Now listen to this guy's logic one more time.
That's what I wanted to lay the groundwork for. Exactly.
I preempted you. Suicide?
Yeah.
Thousands and thousands of people committing suicide because of this lifestyle. So you have maybe 50 people executed for this versus the damage we've had now. Which one is more merciful?
Exactly the same logic as Hitler. Now, I'm not saying that Hitler was wrong about literally everything. I mean, Hitler was right in that dogs are awesome and that water is necessary to survive and people should eat food also. I mean, I guess he was right about those things. And I'm willing to examine anything, but Hitler was wrong about this. Okay? I don't know how these people are they unaware of that, about Hitler proposing this exact idea? It was wrong then. Not morally. I mean, yes, morally, but not because of the morality. It's wrong because it wasn't a deterrent. It was wrong then, and it's wrong now. Where are these people? They're just gone. So, Joel Webbin, just a little bit more about him if you don't know him. I'll just let him explain what his goals are here. This one is from mid-May 2024.
We are going to behave as a Christian people. And what does that mean? It means we're going to ban pornography. It means we are going to ban no-fault divorce. It means we are going to utterly abolish abortion.
So ban adult entertainment. Yeah, by the way, party of small government, right? And parents' rights? What happened to all that? It goes right out the window when these people get a little bit of power. They don't even care about that. It seems like Joel Webbin and anybody else in his little club was only using party of small government to their advantage until they got into a position of authority. Now they can wreck everything. Okay, so he wants to abolish abortion too, right?
Including in vitro, including the hormonal birth control pill, every single one of its forms, not just the Planned Parenthood clinic in Texas, but we're going to go down to the local CVS and we're going to start knocking those pills off the shelf. No more human sacrifice. So a civil magistrate can do that.
Yeah,
he can and should do that.
Okay, my God, dude. I assume he's talking about Plan B birth control, right? A lot of people call this the abortion pill. It is not an abortion pill. It does not cause an abortion. So if you do things with somebody or you are taken advantage of, I'm trying to say this in a monetizer-friendly way. I'm sorry. I'm kind of downplaying. If you're by somebody, I'm just going to come out and say it. Somebody you and you take Plan B within 3 days, then the egg, your egg that you have in your uterus will not attach to the uterine wall if you take Plan B, which means you will not get pregnant. Not that you terminate a pregnancy. That's not what's happening. You simply don't get pregnant. He talks about in vitro fertilization. He doesn't want to do that anymore. People use IVF, in vitro fertilization, to have kids, people who couldn't otherwise have children. This is like bringing new life into the world, who's wanted and, wants to build upon everything. How can he justify this to himself? IVF is where they take the egg cells and the sperm cells and they put them in a petri dish, let them grow for 3 days in that dish, and then they implant the cell, the new cell that's formed after 3 days, into the mother. The reason he wants to ban IVF is because they take multiple eggs from the mother because it's a very invasive process. It requires like surgery to my knowledge. I don't know, unless it's gotten better at this point. So you take like 15 eggs. A woman will almost certainly not want more than 15 kids, right? Take 15 of them, and they fertilize those in the petri dishes also, and then they cryogenically freeze them. They put them in an environment where they're completely stationary and frozen for as long as the mom wants, and they pay like $60 a month to store them or whatever, and when they're ready to have a new kid, they can implant the embryo, one of the new ones, and have the kid. When the mom's done having children, they'll discard any cryogenically frozen material. It's not a baby. It's literally like 2 cells. It is the sperm cell entering the egg cell. That's it. That's what happens. And he wants to ban it because it's abortion of a baby. I don't even know what to say about this. Where's the line going to be drawn for this guy? In his mind, is it like as soon as you stand up to get a towel, there's a third person in the room with you? Is that the idea? Is there like a de facto genocidal battlefield in like your sock that's next to the bed or something? Like, how far back are we going to go with this? Right now, I'm scratching my nose, right? I'm killing more cells right now than I would be if I disposed of like 7 embryos that were cryogenically frozen. And my cells are capable of turning into human beings too, through cloning and stuff. We have to draw a line somewhere, and this guy is crossing every line that's laid down by society. It's intentionally. Just a little bit more context on him. This is him right here on the left, and I'm sorry, on the right. This is Joel Webbin, and on the left is a state senator from Oklahoma named Dusty Devers, and he believes all the same things as Joel Webbin. That's why they're sharing a stage here. They're from the same, not denomination, but same. Well, I guess it's a denomination. They'd probably call themselves non-denominational, but it's its own set of Christian beliefs. Anyway, from the same group of Christianity, whatever. Listen to what Dusty Devers has to say while sitting next to Joel Webbin here. This one is from April 9th, 2024.
So I didn't catch any of the Allie Beth Stuckey trad wife conversation because I was out legislating morality.
And about time.
You know why they were laughing at that? I assume it's, at least for the people on stage, it's because they know that you aren't supposed to legislate morality, ever. We aren't legislating morality at any point. All we're doing is creating laws based on the principle, your right to swing your fist ends at the tip of my nose. Your rights extend all the way up to where my rights begin, but no further. So if you're trying to like impose your own moral beliefs on somebody else, that's taking their rights away. Our rights are defined in the Constitution, right? We can freedom of religion and freedom of the press, freedom of speech, and so on and so forth. All you should be doing is protecting those rights. All the government should be doing, all of the bills in Congress or whatever should be moving us toward that goal of protecting rights of people. That's it. Oh, I guess in printing new money and minting coins and renaming that, stuff. I mean, there are some other reasons for congressional bills, but the point is, you should never, ever legislate morality. And not only is he legislating morality, he's legislating Christian morality. And not just Christian, his version of Christian, his interpretation of the Bible. This clip from Dusty Devers never gets old. I love this clip to death. And I'm sorry, guys, you're going to hear this until the end of time.
When we saw churches closing for long periods, we saw people, with this love your neighbor propaganda.
Love your neighbor propaganda. I cannot get over that. Literally words from Jesus' mouth, and he's calling it propaganda. I can't. Where are their heads? How did they get here? This is absolutely nuts. How did they get here, and how do we pull them back? Is there a way? Can we possibly pull these people back to reality? At the very least, we need to create a system in which they have virtually no power. I want to live in a system in which people who want to erase others' rights don't exist in that system. It's like the old paradox of tolerance, if you're familiar with that. You have to, if you want to be tolerant, then that means you have to tolerate the intolerant. If you want to have a big umbrella where everybody can live happily and they don't have any of their rights taken away and anybody can run for office, then you have to allow people who don't believe that everybody should be able to run or whatever. You have to remove them from the system. It's a paradox. By doing so, you are intolerant of the intolerant. But in my mind, that's not a paradox. In my mind, tolerance is a social contract that you sign on to. And everybody who signs on to the tolerance contract is protected. If they don't sign on to this social contract and they're intolerant, then they're not protected by it. It's just, how do you get through to them? Is it possible? We have to go one person at a time, basically. You know, after World War II, there was the reason I keep bringing up World War II is because we're in a system where people are extremists and vicious about hating certain groups of people in the exact same way. Not that World War II is the only example of that, or even the worst. There are more extreme examples. They're just not as well known, and they're like further back in the past. But in Germany, it was the hate machine looked very similar to what the hate machine looks like today, and it's fueled by social media today. We didn't have social media 50, 60, 70, 80 years ago, or 100 years. I don't know where their heads are at or how we pull them back. Tell me what you think about it in the comments.